We're here with former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern. Bertie, thanks for taking the time. The UK government have published its technical papers on the possible implications of a no-deal Brexit. What's your response to the papers, and do you think a no-deal scenario is likely?
Well, it's possible, but in my view, an unlikely possibility. I think the technical papers are kind of a follow-on to what they did last year when they put up their position papers last summer, and I think it's a good and useful and clever way of filling the summer weeks and the debate. I think the British government do not want to be accused of not having made preparations if there was no deal. There was some of that criticism early on. So I think that the papers, you can read them two ways, but I think the Prime Minister wanted to be able to say that they looked at the consequences of no deal, and B, I think she wanted to be able to show to the wider audience, and not only our own party, but I think maybe her own party, but a wider audience as well, you know, to realise what she has now come to realise in the last 12 months, but not maybe before, that there are huge consequences, and mainly negative consequences. And I only had a quick look through about 10 of the documents, and because there's a hell of a lot of reading in them, but it does show just the huge consequences that would all be by and large negative for the British economy. And it's further evidence that those who say about all the pluses, all the naysayers and the hardline Brexiteers, that there's no good news for Britain in this. And I think the value of the papers is that argument that they will find a few scraps of good news, but by and large, from an English point of view, from a British point of view, for an economy point of view, for their trading, for their future relationships, for their historic position with the EU, all of the things they're trying to address in these papers, that by and large are negative.
What about in the papers where they address that they recognise that there is a unique relationship between Ireland and the UK, but for businesses in the north that are trading across the border, it's suggested that they seek advice from the Irish government? Yeah,
well, it's good that they reckon we have better answers than them. You know, I think it's a strange way to try and play it off, but I think it's a bit of a kickback to what we've been saying in many respects to them. You come up with the solutions. We're not going to give you the solutions. So I think that's what that's about. It's a bit of a playback. Of course, it's not the answer, but I think I interpret it as that. You've been accusing us, or you've been pointing out to us. You have to come up with the solutions. We'll sit here. So I think that's what that's about. And I suppose if you take it in that spirit, fair enough. But thankfully we do have a lot of the answers. And in fairness, if it was this time last year or this time 2 years ago, we'd be all saying our level of preparedness here is not good. But I think across sectors and across industries, because a lot of the good work done, by the farming organisations, by the business organisations, our level of preparedness and our knowledge now is really grown in the last 12 months.
And I'll get into the farming side of things in a moment, Bertie. But do you think that in general terms, what do you make of where we're at the moment, where the negotiations are at? Did you anticipate that they would be much farther on at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, they should have been. To take it that, I suppose, not to go back on what is a history lesson now, triggering Article 50 and setting the date without any of the groundwork done, to me always was a very poor decision. She didn't have to trigger Article 50 at the time that she did. A lot of the preparation, a lot of the analysis, a lot of the preparatory discussions, but not negotiations, could have been going on before you trigger that. Now you come to a position where, you know, 3/4 of the negotiating time is gone, and there doesn't seem to be much conclusive analysis of where we're going. And, you know, that's poor negotiations, no matter what way, saying it its most polite terms. It's not certainly the way I would do things, and I'm surprised that the British government, who are usually, you know, fairly good hands at these kind of negotiations, would do. But I suppose that's because of the political problems, the political uncertainty, the level of enmity and animosity that's been built up within the political system over this, the fact that the Tory party are sixes or sevens and the Labour Party don't seem to be far behind them. You know, that has led to this position. But anyway, where we are as we go into what is the final session, is that we head towards September. 2 months really before a deal is meant to be wrapped up, to give sufficient time for it to go to the Commission, to the Parliament. To be just frank about it, I don't see that happening. I do not see them having completed discussions at the end of October. I think the ball, or the can, as it has been described in the UK, it'll be kicked down the road again.
How far down the road?
That's hard to say. It could be anything from a month to months. I think if you listen to Barnier, he'd say, you know, we must conclude it. But I don't. The danger of rushing it, I think, you know, my view on the date of having this midnight grandstand the last day, I would be in favour of kicking it down the road at least, you know, towards Christmas, because my fear, and as I've been expressing now for the you know, all year, is that the European Commission and the Parliament, the Barnier Committee, and the British government find themselves at the end of October and find themselves obliged to conclude a comprehensive deal when they've effectively ran out of time and they can't conclude it. And then you try to everybody shows their last hand on the last few days, and that you can be bounced into a position, good or bad, but normally in these situations it's bad. So I hate those kind of negotiations. It is often what happens. I've been part of them myself. I'm not saying that it's unique or anything like that, but you know, these are negotiations that have lasting effects for a long time across all sectors. Massively important for us, massively important for agriculture, massively important for every aspect of the economy. So I think bouncing yourself in to a deadline that shouldn't have been a deadline that was set in the first place just compounds a bad decision. By back to what I said about triggering Article 50 when it wasn't necessary to do so, and there was no compulsion to do it that time. So there will be an extension. I'm fairly certain there'll be an extension. Everyone's saying at the moment, but there won't, so I'm going against the tide, but I think there will. It might be short, but that'll be better than trying to conclude it by Halloween.
And do you think the EU would go for that extension, that they would?
Yeah, I think they'd be silly not to. I think they'll keep on saying, by the way, for the next 6 weeks there's no extension. But I think when the reality, how they can conclude a deal is detailed and is comprehensive and as argumentative and as politically difficult within a period of effectively 2 months is beyond me. And you know, I'd rather see it's not a question of no deal long term. We're only talking about no deal for an interim period that allows the negotiations to continue, and maybe in a calmer way. Like if you look at it, the reason the October deadline is there is because the March deadline is there because of they've already moved the March deadline effectively by having the transitional period, which means in the transitional period that the single market rules and the customs union rules and effectively how we live at the moment in the European Union will continue for a 2-year period. So the reason to spend a bit more time doing it is I think really something that I can't see any argument against.
Do you think the transitional period would also be extended?
They probably won't say that yet, but if I was Theresa May and with her political difficulties, now Barnier I think might be far tougher on this, but you would be trying to kick the can to the other side of the British election. And let this be argued around. Like, what I would like to see is that the referendum for this, rather than people talking about a second referendum, which I don't really see. I think people have given their view 2 years ago now, so I can't see them going back and having that referendum again. But the British general election could be the referendum, and that would be a far clearer one. Like, what are we now? We're 2 years. We'll be 2 years out from British general election. So let the transition period get to the other side of that, and let the British general election, and let the debate in the next British general election be about the issues that should have been debated in the last referendum, whether the United Kingdom want to break 50 years of partnership with the European Union, and I think that would be a far better political debate. And I'd love to tell you that I'm very impressed with the Labour Party's policies, but anyway, they're as confusing as the Tories at the moment, and that's the reality.
What about the backstop issue? Do you think we will have a satisfactory outcome there?
Yeah, I think, there's a deal on that of last year. Will it remain exactly as it was put to us last December? I don't think that's likely. I mean, what we want to ensure, we've moved a long way down that road. Like, the free movement of people is kind of now a given. There's not going to be a difficulty. Well, there might be a free movement of people outside of the UK, and it will be a different issue. But I think the relationship with Ireland, as far as travel, as far as movement for us, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. We're not going to have any of the problems that we thought about people travelling across the border and that. So it's really down to goods and trade, I think. And if Theresa May sticks by her Chequers white paper, which we have to assume that she's wedded to that to a certain extent, then that's okay. Like, that covers trade fairly well. It doesn't cover services, because services is big to the UK. So. And effectively what that white paper says, when you stop all the nonsense, is that the customs union would continue. Now, the Brexiteers don't want that, but I mean, the British government have put a white paper out. The white paper isn't written in stone, we know that. But I think that's workable enough. And from the border point of view, from a security point of view on the border, or creating difficulties in the border, I think that's workable through. I cannot see. I was in Queen's University yesterday debating these issues, and talking to people in Northern Ireland and this, and I think the heat has gone out of that issue, other than people trying to generate it. So I hope that works out okay for us. So whether the backstop is exactly as it was, but once we keep a frictionless border that we can trade, and we can trade openly, north and south, and we can trade with the UK, let's hope that's okay.
And on agriculture in particular, the implications obviously of Brexit are very, very bleak across all the sectors, particularly for the beef sector, with 50% of our exports destined for the UK. Where will that beef go after Brexit? Well,
while we're out there already, and in fairness, the industry is doing their best to see where we can do alternative markets. And I must say, I must say I salute the agricultural industry and the way they're out there, examining and looking and preparing themselves, probably more than most sectors have done. And I think that's been a very good thing. But in the end of the day, the British market, and I've seen this all my political life, is massively important to us. You cannot be dealing with we have to get stuff on shelves quick as possible. That's how we've built up the industry, for the last half century and longer. And for us, there's no beating getting fast time from our factories, from our farms, from our poultry people, from our horticultural industries, quick as we can, A to B, into the British market. And there's not alternative markets for a high proportion, as good as people are trying to do. And I think they will pull down the percentage, but still it's a huge market. So how that's concluded in the end. But let's be frank about it. The British are massive net importers of good quality food. They have a large population. They don't have other easy markets that are non-European that they can do these silly trade deals they talk about and find stuff in. Yes, they can have their relationships with New Zealand and Australia, and they can get certain amount, but they cannot get quality, fresh, durable products that are onto their marketplace. And as we move to an age of more and more environmentalists, when we're moving away from packaging and injecting into foodstuffs that will have long lives. That's why I'm a big supporter of that. I think we should be pushing hard and hard to get out of packaging, because the more non-packaging, the more the Irish product becomes far better. So I think we have to do that. But the British are conscious of this. I talk to many British politicians and officials, and I think this game isn't lost by us, and we just need to keep up the pressure. We need to keep agriculture on the front page. And I think I've seen this yesterday in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, in the end of the day, Northern Ireland agriculture is 87% dependent on the European Union, and it's in their interest to keep rattling the can in Britain. The DUP have to be continually reminded of that, because it's in their interest that Northern Ireland farmers, which is really the same arguments for us, that we protect our market share in the UK market.
Post-Brexit, if food price drops in the UK, how would Irish beef compete with lower priced qualities meat from other countries?
This is going to be a battle, for market share. But I think it'll be another day's battle. But I would say this: the UK have to be very, very careful where they take their alternative supplies from. I don't want to say anything derogatory about any country's market, but they have to be very clear that the disease preventative programs that the UK were so strong about for the last 40 years are maintained, that the high regulatory environment is maintained, that the quality standards that we have proved beyond all doubt in this country, that if they're going somewhere else, they have to be able to show to their market that. And if they don't show it to their market, well, I think there'll be a good Irish lobby that will highlight the differences. I'm not convinced that it's so easy for British multiples to be able to go elsewhere to receive the kind of quality and quantity and standards and regulatory, environmental and health standards that people demand nowadays. And I trust the Irish industry to be able to play that game at a high level.
You mentioned there about farming in Northern Ireland, and that farmers are 87% dependent on supports from the Common Agricultural Policy in the EU. Do you think, how much of a priority do you think Northern farmers are to the UK government at the moment? Because it is a very, very vulnerable region.
Yeah, I don't think the British government, and I'm not saying this tongue in cheek, I don't think the British government take too much interest in Northern Ireland, full stop. In my day, there was a Northern Ireland department dealing with mainly the political issues, but dealing with all issues in number 10. There's nobody now in number 10 dealing exclusively with Northern Ireland. Nobody. Our own government, the DUP are the dominant party on that side, propping up the British government. There has been no meeting between the Taoiseach or the Irish government and the DUP since the last commemoration in Enniskillen on the 7th or 8th of November. So there's no real interest in number 10, and there's no real interest with the DUP either. And that's that's a pity. I don't think that should sustain itself for very long. I think the institutions are necessary to be in Northern Ireland. And if I've been asked, can I just give you the logic of this? Like, if the institutions in Northern Ireland were up and running tomorrow, which I'd like to see them, I know they won't be tomorrow, but let's say before Christmas. Like, people say, oh, you cannot get the institutions up and running until we see where Brexit goes. I stand that on its head. If the institutions were up in Northern Ireland in the next number of weeks, the executive in Northern Ireland would be able to deal with these issues. The Assembly in Northern Ireland would be able to deal with these issues. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister would be able to go to Europe, go to Britain and argue these issues. The North-South element would be between the Assembly and our government. They could be dealing with these issues. And the East-West between the Irish government and the British government could be dealing with these issues. And you know what's happening today? There's nobody dealing with these issues. And there's no connection. So the Assembly, or the institutions in Northern Ireland, all three strand, would be a help to the Brexit debate. And those who say the opposite, I'm afraid, are misleading the people.
What about the Irish government's preparedness? Are you confident that they will see the country through this and protect the agricultural sector? Yeah,
I've been supportive of the Irish government, because I think somebody that's held the offices that I've held would be not a team player if I wasn't doing that. So I support the Irish government's efforts, and I support the efforts that they're putting in. But I think there's no day to be lost. I think whatever industry, but in particularly in agriculture, because I know all the stats. We could keep you here all day talking about the stats. You know them as well. That the Irish farming and the small companies start off on their export life in one market, in the UK market. And then maybe they grow, and maybe then they become Kerry and whatever, but we all start small. So that perishable, important market for all our products is into the UK. So I think every day we have to be fighting the cause of agriculture. Agriculture isn't the farmers of Ireland. It's a huge part of the economy, of the countryside, of the rural communities. I was lucky enough in my political career to have negotiated the agriculture rounds, or the financial perspectives. I think I did 3 or 4 of them as finance ministers and as Taoiseach over the years. And agriculture always was the big one for us. I always worked with all the farm bodies in those discussions, and it taught me, if I needed it, because my background, my father was a farm manager, my sister farms on my relations farm. So, I knew it instinctively, but I learned it in politics and as Minister of Finance and as Taoiseach, that, this is incredibly important to our economy and incredibly important to our country, and it has to get prominence into the negotiations.
Bertie, I also just have to ask you about any potential plans or intentions on the presidential election, either now or in the future.
Well, now I think it's the campaign is off. I'll be a spectator watching it, and God knows what is the future.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Bertie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice talking to you.